One car in this collection won a Grand Prix in the hands of a man who died young and became a legend. Another raced at Le Mans, at Daytona, at Spa, before its owner climbed in and won with it himself. And they all belonged to a drummer. Nick Mason spent 50 years keeping time for Pink Floyd. But away from the stage, hidden behind the gates of his estate, sits a collection of racing machines so serious it makes professional teams go quiet. We're talking about a genuine Le Mans winner. A car worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes. And a strange, spidery little machine he once called perhaps the greatest racer he ever owned. Here's the part that catches people out. Mason doesn't lock these away as trophies. He races them, wheel to wheel, at speed, well past the age most men have hung up the keys. So which 10 machines are actually hidden inside his garage? Stay with me, because number 1 is the single most valuable car on the planet, and it's the one he loves most. Let's start with the car that got him into all of this. If you enjoy forgotten British car stories like this, consider subscribing. There are many more coming every week. Number 10, the Aston Martin Ulster. Before the Ferraris, before the Le Mans cars, before any of the exotic machinery worth millions, there was this. A small pre-war Aston Martin, delicate and green, riding on skinny tires, barely wider than a bicycle's. The sort of car you'd expect to see in a scratchy black and white photograph, not tearing round a modern circuit with a rock star at the wheel. This is the car that started everything. Back in the early 70s, when Pink Floyd were becoming one of the biggest acts on earth, Mason bought this little Aston. And it lit a fire in him that never once went out. It pulled him headlong into the world of historic racing and simply never let him leave. And here's what tells you everything about the man. He didn't retire it. He didn't wrap it in cotton wool and hang it on a wall. He kept racing that same Aston, decade after decade, long after it would have been perfectly reasonable to stop. Think about that for a moment. The very first serious car he bought, and he was still out there wrestling it round racetracks half a century later, grey-haired and grinning. Most people's first cars end up rusting quietly in a scrapyard, forgotten. His became a lifelong companion, a friend he point-blank refused to give up on, no matter how much time passed or how much the car was worth. So if this little pre-war Aston was the spark, what was the fire? The next car is where his taste took a serious, and seriously fast, turn. Number 9, the Lotus 18. Now we jump into single-seater territory, and into one of the cleverest little cars ever made. The Lotus 18 was a proper racing machine, low and light and stripped of anything unnecessary, the kind of car that helped change the entire face of motorsport when it arrived. This was one of the designs that put the engine behind the driver and quietly rewrote the rulebook forever. Before this thinking took hold, racing cars carried their engines up front like cart horses pulling a cart. Putting the weight behind the driver flipped everything on its head, and before long, the whole sport had no choice but to follow. Mason has one of these in his collection, and once again, it isn't a static ornament. It's a genuine period single-seater, a car built to be driven hard, with a cockpit so tight you almost wear it rather than sit in it. Picture it for a second. A drummer from one of the world's biggest rock bands, a man who filled stadiums, folded into a tiny open-wheeled racing car from the dawn of the modern era, knees up around the steering wheel, helmet on, visor down, ready to go. No roll cage worth the name. No modern protection. Just him and the machine. That single image tells you this man's passion runs far, far deeper than money ever could. But a single-seater is one thing. The next car in his collection wears one of the most beautiful shapes ever to leave a British factory. Number 8. The Jaguar D-Type. If you've ever wondered what a work of art with an engine looks like, this is your answer. The Jaguar D-Type is all curves and menace, a low silver and green missile designed for one purpose, to win the toughest endurance races on the planet. Mason's D-Type joined his collection back in 1976, making it one of the longest-serving cars he owns. Nearly 50 years in one man's care, and in that time, it hasn't sat idle. He has raced this D-Type at Goodwood, one of the most sacred stretches of tarmac in all of British motorsport, a place where the ghosts of racing's golden age still seem to hang in the air. Imagine the sound of that straight-six engine howling and echoing round the circuit, a car worth an absolute fortune being driven exactly as its makers intended, flat out, tail twitching, tires scrabbling for grip through every corner. Here's the emotional part. This isn't a man buying trophies to prove how rich he is to anyone watching. This is a man preserving history by using it, the way it was always meant to be used. Every single time he takes that D-Type out and lets it sing, he's keeping a precious piece of Britain's racing soul alive for the rest of us. And speaking of keeping history alive, the next car isn't just fast. It's the fastest surviving link to one of the most tragic and beautiful eras racing ever knew. Number 7. The Maserati 250F. Some cars are quick, some cars are beautiful, and a rare few are so significant that they belong in a museum. The Maserati 250F is all three. This was the car of the golden age of Grand Prix racing, the 1950s, when drivers wore cloth caps instead of proper helmets, wore no seatbelts at all, and stared death in the face at every single corner. It's slender, it's achingly elegant, and it is utterly without mercy. This is the shape that legends like Fangio wrestled to world championships. Mason owns one, and true to form, he has raced a 250F himself in historic competition. Even now, cars run under his racing operation, 10/10ths, still turn up at events like Goodwood, carrying that legendary name forward into a brand new century. Just imagine the courage it takes to climb into a car with no modern safety, no crumple zones, no electronic nannies, and race it the way the old masters did. Mason does it not for glory, but out of respect for the men who drove these machines when the danger was terrifyingly real. Now, that respect for danger leads us to a car with a truly wild story. The next machine didn't just race. It roared into the record books on one unforgettable British afternoon. Number 6. The Maserati Tipo 60, the Birdcage. Look at this car and you'll understand the nickname instantly. Underneath its bodywork sits a frame made from dozens upon dozens of thin steel tubes, all welded together in an intricate lattice. It looks, quite literally, like a birdcage. And it's one of the most extraordinary things ever built. Mason himself has described the Tipo 60 as perhaps the greatest race car he has ever owned. Think about that for a man with a garage full of Ferraris and Le Mans legends. This spidery, strange little Maserati sits at the very top of his affections. And here's why. Back in 1993, at the British Grand Prix, in front of a packed home crowd who'd come to watch the fastest cars in the world, Mason took this old birdcage out for a support race. And he won it. A rock drummer, wrestling a priceless piece of Italian racing history to victory on the biggest motorsport weekend of the British year. You genuinely could not script a better moment if you tried. That's the magic of this collection. It isn't about spectating, it's about a man living out his wildest dreams behind the wheel of cars most of us will only ever see behind glass. And now we leave Italy's road races behind for something built purely to devour the world's greatest endurance track. Number 5. The Ferrari 512 B4M. Here's where the collection starts baring its teeth. The 512 B4M was a serious, purpose-built competition Ferrari, a low, wide, aggressive machine designed to be hurled down the Mulsanne Straight at Le Mans for 24 brutal hours. This wasn't a road car dressed up to look sporty. This was the real thing, a genuine works-style endurance racer with the scars and the pedigree to prove it. And Mason didn't just park it in a heated garage to admire from a distance. When his story was written, he was preparing to race this very Ferrari at Le Mans itself, on the same punishing circuit it was born to conquer, through the day and into the black of night. Let that sink in for a moment. A man taking a priceless, irreplaceable piece of Ferrari history back to the very battlefield it was created for, and climbing in to fight. Most collectors would faint at the thought of the risk. Mason relished it. And if a Le Mans Ferrari sounds like the peak, hold on, because the next three cars climb to a level almost beyond belief. Number 4. The Porsche 962. For a long stretch of the 80s and beyond, this was the car that ruled the entire endurance racing world with an iron fist. The Porsche 962 was a genuine monster, a ground-hugging prototype with brutal turbocharged power and downforce so ferocious it could seemingly stick to the road upside down. Getting into one takes real nerve. These cars didn't simply win the odd race here and there. They dominated, filling up podium after podium, year after year, becoming one of the most successful racing machines the sport has ever seen. And Mason has one of these beasts sitting quietly alongside his older, far more delicate classics. Think about the range here. In one collection, you have a fragile pre-war Aston Martin and a fire-breathing 80s prototype capable of terrifying speed. That's not a collector chasing a single theme. That's a man in love with the entire story of motor racing, from its earliest days to its most extreme. The 962 represents the modern, brutal end of that story. But the next car takes us right back to raw, unfiltered danger and to one of the most famous chassis in racing history. Number 3. The Ferrari 512S. This is where the collection stops being impressive and starts being genuinely historic. Not just any 512S, but chassis number 126, a car with a competition record that reads like a motorsport pilgrimage. This exact machine raced at Daytona, at Sebring, at Monza, at Spa, and at Le Mans, all in the single season of 1970, one of the most dangerous, most romantic, most terrifying years the sport has ever known. Every one of those names is a legendary, fearsome circuit that has claimed lives and made heroes, and this one car battled at all of them, driven flat out by men who knew the risks and raced anyway. But the story doesn't end in the past. Mason himself later raced this very Ferrari and won the Atlantic Computer Ferrari Challenge at Donington. So Ace isn't just a car with a glorious history, it's a car that gave its owner his own moment of glory decades later. That's the thread running through everything Mason owns. These aren't relics, they're partners. And the next car might be the most emotional partner of them all, because it carries the fingerprints of a fallen hero. Number 2. The Ferrari 312 T3. Remember the very first line of this video? The Grand Prix won by a man who died young and became a legend? This is that car, Chassis 034. The exact Ferrari in which Gilles Villeneuve won his first ever Formula One Grand Prix, on home soil in Canada, in front of his own delirious countrymen, back in 1978. Villeneuve was fearless to the point of madness, breathtakingly fast, and adored by millions of fans before his life was cut, tragically, brutally short, just a few short years later. He became perhaps the most romantic, most mourned figure the sport has ever produced, a driver spoken about in hushed, reverent tones to this very day. And Nick Mason owns the car that gave Villeneuve his first taste of victory. Sit with the weight of that for a moment. This isn't just aluminium and rubber. It's a shrine to one of racing's greatest what-ifs, a physical piece of a legend most fans can only dream of touching. To own it is to hold a piece of the sport's very heart. For most collectors on Earth, a car like this would be the crown jewel, the undisputed number one. But not here. Because Mason owns something even the richest men on the planet chase in vain. Number 1. The Ferrari 250 GTO. This is it. The most valuable car in the world. Full stop. The Ferrari 250 GTO is the single most coveted, most expensive, most mythologized car ever built by human hands. Only a tiny handful were ever made, just a few dozen in the entire world, and when one of them changes hands, it can command a price that runs into the tens of millions of pounds, sometimes far, far beyond. Billionaires, actual billionaires, spend decades trying and failing to get their hands on one. Money alone isn't enough. You have to be accepted, chosen, welcomed into one of the most exclusive circles on the planet. And Nick Mason, the drummer from Pink Floyd, has one. Not a replica, not a tribute, a genuine, competition-bred 250 GTO. He has owned it for many years, And here's the detail that defines the entire man. He has called it his favorite. Out of everything, out of the Le Mans cars, the Grand Prix winners, the Villeneuve Ferrari, this is the one closest to his heart. And true to the spirit of this entire collection, he doesn't hide it away behind steel doors and alarm systems. He has driven it, used it, taken it out on the road, and shared it with the world, treating the single most precious car on the planet not as a cold investment, locked in a vault waiting to be sold, but as a living thing, to be loved, enjoyed, and heard. That's the real secret, hidden inside Nick Mason's collection. It was never, ever about the money. A man who could have bought absolutely anything chose instead to buy history, and then found the courage to actually use it, wear it, and risk it. He raced the untouchable. He drove the priceless. He took cars other men would lock in a vault and hurled them round racetracks the way their makers always dreamed they'd be driven. If you enjoy forgotten British car stories like this, consider subscribing. There are many more coming every week.